Today on the channel, we're going to be taking a look at a sub $200 retro gaming hard drive that can run everything from your favorite classic consoles, including NES, all the way up to PlayStation 2, not to mention it even runs some of today's most recent releases. Hello YouTube, it's me, it's Michael B. Thank you so much for checking out the video, and today we're going to be taking a look at the HyperBase Mix 5TB hard drive from JMachen. So that's right guys, in today's video we're going to be talking about another retro gaming hard drive. This time it's the HyperBase Mix 5TB hard drive disk from JMachen. This thing features 3 systems in one, 60,000 plus games, and coming in at under $200. But before we get into that, I want to say thank you so much everybody for checking out the video. Guys, I always appreciate the support. If this is your first time to the channel, you like what you see, go ahead, subscribe, click the bell for notifications, all that YouTube jazz. So guys, in this unassuming box is the JMachen HyperBase Mix 5TB hard drive. Let's take a look at what's included. So first off, we do get the 5TB hard drive disk, and yeah, that's about it. You also get the proprietary USB cable, and there is nothing else inside this box. Luckily, this hard disk drive is relatively plug and play. Once you plug it in, you're going to go in and it's going to be install me first. So you go in, and if you already have your PC set up for gaming, you won't need to do any of that. Then included right on the flash drive, hard drive, when you first go in, there is instructions for you to get things up and running. I did say this was relatively plug and play. There are some foibles to that, different things that you might have to do if stuff doesn't run. So we're going to go to our first system here, which is Launchbox. Here's the weird thing about this. They call it the HyperBase Mix because it actually is 3 front ends in one. And actually, to utilize all the games on the front end, you're going to have to use each of the front ends. So in order to play everything on the hard drive, you're going to have to use each of the front ends. Here, I went into Launchbox, and this is where you're going to find your Nintendo Entertainment System collection. It's a relatively full list, and the games play really well. Of course, as you know, first thing I'm going to do is test out, the latency issues, and if I can get past Quickman's lasers without using the flash save, I'll do it. Then I checked out some other games, including one of my favorites here, Power Blade, and everything ran relatively well. Next, I went on to N64. As you know, N64 sometimes will cause problems, but keep in mind, guys, this is relative to the power of your PC. One issue I did notice with this ROM was while I was shooting my gun, it was angling up for whatever reason, so I don't know exactly why that was happening, but that certainly did impact my enjoyment of GoldenEye. Then I checked out Cruising USA, which is usually a pretty hard game to run through Nintendo emulation. One of my all-time favorites. I played a bunch of this back in the day, and everything ran really well. From there, I checked out Nintendo GameCube. I'm really big on GameCube emulation recently, and while the games did look incredibly good, they all ran very well, for some reason they're all running in full screen mode as opposed to 4:3, and I couldn't seem to figure out how to actually change the aspect ratio in Launchbox, so keep that in mind when you're playing GameCube games. I then went on to play Star Fox Assault, and man, this game looks beautiful on my PC through this front end. What a great experience, but again, it was full screen and not in 4:3. I then went and checked out Nintendo Wii, and they've got a pretty small Wii library compared to other gaming hard drives that I've picked up in the past, and much like with the GameCube, your Wii experience is also going to be full screen. Some of the games on the Wii were ready for full screen, but most of them were still, supposed to be in 4:3, so it would be nice if there was an option to change the aspect ratio. Maybe there is, I couldn't figure figure it out. They also advertised Nintendo Switch games on this, and I went to check them out, but unfortunately, I could not get them to load. It kept coming up with an error. I do believe this was due to my Norton antivirus, and they do mention that in the instruction manual that sometimes games won't load and you need to turn off certain blockers in your antivirus. So that may be why this was happening. I'm not 100% sure, but I can also confirm with the limited Wii U library as well, it was the same issue. I just could not get them to run. Whether it was interference with my antivirus, I don't really know. So, another issue I was having was PlayStation 1 games and 3DO games weren't initially working, and they actually mentioned this in the instruction manual. One of the weird things you have to do is make sure your drive is actually set to O, to read as O. So, you know how your drives will read as like A, B, C, D, E, F? Well, you want to switch it to O, and cool enough, they actually have an instructional video right there on the drive to show you how to do that, so you can switch your drive over to drive O. Once I had that done, I could finally access the 3DO library. It wasn't the best 3DO library, as we didn't have, a lot of the really good games like Street Fighter and Ridge Racer, but I was able to play some Wolfenstein 3D, and this brought me back to my early PC days. Everything ran really well, and I had a lot of fun playing Wolfenstein. Wish it was a more expanded library. So, I finally got to go check out PlayStation. PlayStation ran really well. Library was great. Had a lot of those impressive Square, at the time, Squaresoft games. Ran really well. Of course, the audio was there. No missing audio, so the experience was pretty good. Of course, my old friend Einhander, I'll always pop this in when testing PlayStation, just because it's such a beautiful polygonal game. Einhander ran perfectly, so very happy with the PlayStation 1 performance. Then I checked out the PlayStation 2 library, and I gotta say, kudos to them for having a much more impressive PlayStation 2 library than some of their competitors. There were a lot of, classic horror games, like right here, I'm playing a very expensive game, Haunting Ground will work very well. We also had some of those classic RPGs we were looking for, not all of them, but PS2 runs really well, and you actually get a very decent game selection on the HyperBase mix, so good job, JMachen, on that. I also tested out Castlevania. You remember on my last hard disk drive review, I tested out Castlevania a lot between PlayStation and Xbox, which was the same game. Of course, Castlevania Lament of Innocent here is a game I owned. I absolutely loved it. Ran really well. PlayStation 2 is a dream on this hard drive. Then it actually advertises PlayStation 3 as well, a very limited library here, as you can see. I tested out Lollipop Chainsaw, everything seemed to run really well. PS3 emulation was pretty impressive, so, I would have been fine with them leaving this off to make more room for more PlayStation 2 and classic games, but if you want to check out the small library of PS3 games that are available, they do run really well, and you can play something fun like this. Then moving on to something a little bit more exciting, they had a pretty good Saturn library. One thing that was disappointing, originally when I turned on Daytona, there was music, but there was no actual in-game sound, and I was worried that would happen with all Saturn games. But then I checked out Daytona Championship Series, and everything was there. They also have some very expensive and hard-to-find games, like Guardian Heroes here. Checked it out, everything ran really well. I think you'll be very happy with the way the Saturn emulation works on this thing. From there, I checked out Dreamcast. They've got a pretty impressive Dreamcast library here. Everything you could possibly be looking for. It all runs really well. No weird aspect ratio stuff. Everything's in 4:3, and it looks really good. It's been a long time since I played House of the Dead with controller controls, so this was tough to get used to, but I had a lot of fun. Looks beautiful. Of course, you know me, I always check out Soul Calibur when testing out the Dreamcast, and this ran beautifully. Very happy with Dreamcast performance on this hard disk drive. So if you want to access the rest of the games, like I mentioned earlier, you're going to have to pop out into one of the different front ends. The next one up is RetroB. This is more like an emulation station. Anybody who's done a Pi 3, you would be familiar with this. This is where the rest of the games are, you know, all the older stuff, all the other Sega systems that you didn't see in Launchbox. So the first thing I'm going to test out, being a big fanboy, is of course Sega CD. Sega CD library is pretty impressive. A lot of those expensive and hard to find games there. Here I am playing a little Popful Mail. It's one that I would never buy due to the cost, but thanks to emulation devices like this, you can experience an expensive game like this one. And everything runs like it should. The CD audio sound is beautiful. You'll be impressed. From there, I wanted to check out TurboGrafx 16, and while they do have a pretty big library, it's not exactly TurboGrafx 16. Everything is Japanese in PC Engine. So, of course, I went in to try to find my favorite game. Couldn't find it, but I did find it under its Japanese name, Blazing Lasers, otherwise known as Gunhead. So if you're a big TurboGrafx 16 enthusiast like me, unfortunately you won't get your 95 North American titles. Everything's in Japanese, so keep that in mind if you're buying this to play TurboGrafx 16. I also checked out some Sega 32X, played a little bit of Mortal Kombat 2, my favorite game in that series. It was okay. At least I can play 32X, right? Then, of course, this is where you're going to find all your arcade games on this hard disk drive as well. Here's me checking out Marvel vs. Capcom 2, and man, does this play well on this hard disk drive. Last but not least, the last front end is actually called Play Night, which is one I wasn't familiar with, so when I went into it, I discovered pretty quickly that this was, in fact, all modern games. It was one of the things I gave this, HDD drive credit for originally was, oh, cool, no, modern games, so they save space for all the retro games, but no, modern games are there if you are so interested. So the first game I tried to load up and play was, in fact, Elden Ring. Everything loaded up pretty well. I went in to play, but I quickly found out that I didn't necessarily know if I wanted to play this because it asked me to play online, and I had a notice come up that something illegal or inappropriate was happening, so I turned it off. I did go in and check out SpiderMan Remastered, and that ran beautifully. Of course, keep in mind that the actual performance is dependent on your PC. My PC is pretty souped up with a 4070, 64 gigabytes of RAM. I have an i7, so performance will vary depending on your PC, but otherwise the full Spider-Man Remastered was there, no fooling around. Anyways, guys, that's my look at the JMachen 5TB HyperBase Mix Retro Gaming Hard Drive Disc. Now, keep in mind, just like any other retro gaming hard drive you're going to find out there, the performance varies depending on the PC you have it plugged into. So if you have a PC that's not great for gaming, this probably isn't going to work as well for you as it did for me. The other thing I really want to bring up, this is called the HyperBase Mix because it features 3 systems in one. You've got open source, you've got RetroBat, and you've got Play Night, which is probably a cool feature for some, but I do find it a little bit strange that you can't access all the games on the hard drive through one, source, one console, one emulator. You do have to open all 3 in order to view the entire game library. This thing also is plug and play ish, meaning that once you plug it into your computer, if you already have a lot of the stuff set up for gaming on your PC, you won't have to do a whole lot. But if you don't, there is a, click here first folder where you're going to go in and basically have to install some files to get this to work with your PC. The other thing that was a little bit frustrating, of course, 3DO and PlayStation 1 games didn't work natively out of the box. I did have to go back and actually update the drive to register as drive O, which was very weird, but cool enough for JMachen to actually include a video in the hard disk drive right there for me to watch that explained for me step by step how to do it. That's one thing I will give them a lot of credit for. The instructions and the preparedness is definitely there. They want you to have a good experience. Some other things that came up, of course, I couldn't get Switch or I couldn't get Wii U games to work. I don't know if that's necessarily JMachen's fault. They did indicate that some programs may not work. You may have to go in and fight your antivirus software. It may work for you. Didn't want to work with Norton on my computer. Other than that, that. The games all work really well. The emulation is really nicely done on the games themselves. The libraries are pretty good. PlayStation 2 actually had some of those RPGs, a pretty full PlayStation 2 library, but it didn't have everything I was looking for. So, of course, some of the more obscure RPGs like Wild Arms 3, 4, and 5 weren't there, but they did have a bunch of stuff, such as, they had horror games like Haunting Grounds, and of course they also had Star Ocean, so I'm playing through the Star Ocean games. I can go play Star Ocean 3 now thanks to that. Overall, I actually really like this hard drive, and at the price point, under $200 for a 5TB hard drive, it seems like a good option for people who want to dip their toes into the retro gaming hard disk drive area of purchases without spending a whole ton of money. Anyways, guys, let me know in the comments, what do you think of the JMachen HyperBase Mix 5TB retro gaming hard disk drive? Is this something you possibly be interested in? Would you want something a little bit more substantial? Maybe a hard disk drive like the Kinhank one I reviewed had 12 terabytes. Let me know in the comments down below. Once again, thank you so very much for watching. This is Michael B. the Game Genie, and I'll talk to you next time.